Hi guys, it's Sid, and today I'm going to be talking about alien abduction. Now, that sounds like a pretty freaky topic, but it's really not as monstrous as it sounds. Please go in with this with an open mind and understand that these other beings we're talking about have higher states of consciousness than we do and different perceptions of things than us. So, if you weren't with us last week, I talked about the ancient aliens and how there was beings on Earth before, and the latest question is, are they back? And to that I say, did they ever really leave? If you missed last week, here's just the catch-up stuff. You should pause and read those cool stories. But there's hieroglyphs of aliens. There's all this proof. There's pyramids that have gold, copper, and limestone on top of them and mercury under them. There's never been a mummy found in a pyramid. There's like tombs for that. So that all is very suspiciously high technology to me. Today we're going to be getting into the abduction stuff. So understand that there's lots of different beings involved in this for many different reasons. When we talk of the aliens that came before, we're going to talk about the Anunnaki, but the beings that are here now abducting is known as the Zeta, reptilian, mantis beings, and a lot more. Here's some common marks: scoop marks, scratchy looking marks, a lot of different kinds. The Pleiadians aren't as much involved in the abduction, but they are helping guide us into this new golden age, the hybrid program I'm going to be getting into next week.
Hello, my starseeds. It's Sydney, and today I'm going to be talking about abduction. Like I said, it's not as scary as it sounds. Like, if you've been abducted and it was scary for you, I'm sorry you went through that. You did have a soul commitment before this life and during this life to go through that experience. So I hope you see the beauty in that and can grow from that if you've experienced something similar to this, especially if you were involved in this program in the earlier days when the beings involved weren't as caring towards us or considerate, but as it went on, they have learned how to treat us better, so it's been a more positive experience for those involved. But I'm going to be looking at my notes back and forth for this video. But I just want to say, before the time frame this sort of starts in 1947, before that, I do believe that aliens have been here in the ethers as like spirit if they didn't know that higher dimensional beings existed. I do think like passed over relatives, stuff like that, angels and demons too, like do exist also, but I feel like maybe most of the time it's actually aliens and you just think it's other things. Because if there's aliens, you know that means there's like a lot, right? Like there's like hundreds, thousands more than humans. So spirits are gonna be otherworldly too that are around here. It's not just gonna be Earth if there's aliens that exist. That's just a thought. But getting back to the point, between 1947 and 1969, there was 12,618 incidences reported to Project Blue Book, which was a top secret U.S. Air Force team whose mission was to like investigate these reports and see if it threatened national security, which it doesn't. But anyways, 701 of these cases still actually remain. So to me, that means it's still an open investigation as to whether or not extraterrestrial life is here. So that, to me, is proof that they are here. They are definitely here. But 1947, when this whole thing starts. Roswell, in New Mexico. A giant flying saucer was seen crashing into a field, and then the government totally picked it all up and didn't say anything about it except that it was a weather balloon. So keep that in mind because they use that excuse again. Pretty interesting one, because it's not a weather balloon. Anyway, also in 1947, this guy named Dahl, don't know if I'm not good at saying names. Him, his son, and his dog saw 6 donut-shaped UFOs when they were in their boat, and they started to like rain down metallic debris, and the dog didn't live, sadly. The next day, though, it was freaky. This guy showed up in a black suit and somehow like knew everything about it and told him to keep quiet or suffer consequences. Keep that in mind too, because that also pops up in other abduction stories. You can read in the description. I have a bunch of links. There's really good ones though that have articles that's like a bunch of just like abduction stories if you're interested in that. In 1948, year after that happened, then there was a World War II fighter pilot who was going cross country, and then he sees a white light like by the wing of his plane, and he's flying next to this for like 27 minutes. He said it made aggressive movements and outmaneuvered his plane, and then it actually like exceeded 400 miles an hour, and the government called that a weather balloon. So they're sneaky. They think they're sneaky. And in 1951, over like a 2-week period of time, in a city in Texas, hundreds of people saw this. There was like blue-green streaks of light in the night sky, and a freshman in college actually got a V formation of lights on camera. And the official explanation for that one actually was migrating birds reflecting streetlights. It keeps getting interestinger. In 1952, when this really picks up speed in publicness, there is a Cub Scout leader driving the boys home from an event in West Palm Beach, and they see this big flash of light outside the car in this field. And horror story, no, Cub Scout leader gets out to investigate. Then he comes back looking straight terrified, burns on him, and he says that he saw a 30-foot in diameter saucer emitting red smoke, and that's how he got the burns, and the grass by where he said it was straight scorched. So that's pretty interesting. After that, the leader of Project Blue Book, Captain Edward Ruppelt, said, with full consent, there was an issue of Life magazine, Marilyn Monroe on the cover, that said there's a case for interplanetary saucers. And in this article on 10 unexplained UFO incidences, he says, I am completely convinced that they have an out-of-the-world basis. So the government was pissed at him for that. And like right after he said that in that magazine was published, there was people that saw like what they thought to be flying saucers or something over the White House and over other government and military buildings, and at the Washington National Airport, and at like nearby Andrew Air Force Base. There was little blimps in the radar. Like at first there was 7 slow-moving objects, and they were laughing about it being a fleet of flying saucers. But when they saw that the other military bases were getting it too, they're like, oh shit, this is actually happening. So that is when Eisenhower got people together and was like, what's going on? And they didn't invite Ruppelt to that meeting. And that's a disappointment that he went to the public that soon with it still being top secret. because without him at that meeting, they decided to not disclose this information. And that meeting was probably one of many, but it was also probably the main one because that was going on at the peak of all this happening, the peak of the government's realization of other life. And it's like they had to go through an awakening too, but theirs wasn't really like a spiritual awakening. It was just a gaining of knowledge that they didn't use correctly. That's why I hope when this information comes out to the masses that you get that info and realize and adjust your morals and use it correctly to like progress in this life and include your galactic family in your life. Like, you have actual family out there, and most people don't even know this. So if you wanted to put this off until today, like, I'll give you some slack. But now that you know this info, you can't ignore it anymore. If you watch this video, don't ignore it anymore, okay? Because you might look like the crazy one now. You're gonna look like the stupid one later. If you heard this and you didn't recognize the signs of this, because it's clear as day that people are getting abducted. Now, I don't want to say numbers, but the numbers I've heard is shocking. Like 20 to 25% of people on Earth, like, getting abducted. That's the numbers I've heard. That's the numbers other people have said. Do I agree with those numbers? To an extent. Like, I feel like it's mainly families that get abducted together. Not all the time, but it does have to do with your DNA most of the time, because most of the time you're getting abducted, it's for your DNA now. In the earlier days, let's go back to the time scale. In the earlier days, when the Greys / Zetas, who is the main culprit in this abduction program that the government has allowed to carry out since the 1950s, they are like a future timeline bad version of us, because they genetically manipulated themselves to the point where they couldn't reproduce. So they're like this dying race, and humans have a very similar DNA to them because we actually have some Zeta in our DNA. So we're compatible to mate with them. So I will get into that in my next video on the hybrid program. But many beings are involved with that. That is a main reason for the abduction. Also, not just that, especially the earlier days, like Betty and Barney Hill days. Like, these beings wanted to just see the new version of the human because we were genetically manipulated by aliens to become this version of the human. They wanted to see throughout evolution from the last however many years what the human's like now, and get a good perspective on that, because they're scientists just like we have scientists here. The aliens are scientists too. They're just more advanced than us. So they were like researching us like if we found a new animal in the rainforest, you know? They were doing that. They were confused why like Betty and Barney, one of them had dentures, one didn't. That was a funny thing that they uncovered in the hypnosis of them, that just makes you think, like, wow. Like, little things like that, it makes you think it's real, because who would think to, like, put that in a story? But it makes sense if you were an alien, if you're looking at it from all perspectives, why you would be so shocked if you were, like, investigating this animal you found. Like, you found a new species of dog, and then one of the dog's teeth came out. Oh, we didn't know the dog was, like, so smart that it had fake teeth when its real teeth weren't good enough, you know? They marked stuff like that down, and other beings would also, you know, take our genetic material, our eggs and sperm, and they would sometimes they would shove stuff up your nose, so people would get nosebleeds if they were abducted a lot. And Missing time is a big one if you're abducted. Now, usually this will happen at night, so you don't really know because you're sleeping. It's just like I didn't feel like I got enough sleep, but you can feel like that and be here on Earth the whole night. So it's hard to like see if that's accurate or not. But another thing is just how you feel about the whole situation in general, but also how you feel before going to bed, how you feel when you wake up, how you feel in the middle of the night if you wake up, and what you can remember from your dreams. Usually, children get abducted a lot because one, they like just got reincarnated, back into this planet, and they aren't as brainwashed as, older kids or adults. So it's easier for them to just like go with like literally like past family members or like beings that they might actually remember from other lives, or just like souls that they feel connected to or like because they have a heightened vibration and because they're just a part of the younger generation that naturally has higher states of consciousness than us. So children get abducted the most, families, and people who agree to it, because like I said earlier, everyone actually agrees whether they remember or not. There's probably a few cases where you haven't agreed and there's not so nice beings abducting you. That's a whole different story. But that doesn't usually happen because these beings I'm talking about are higher dimensional beings. Now, people wonder why the aliens don't just land. That's a very common thing, and I totally understand your frustration. But the thing is, they're doing this for us. If a higher dimensional being just landed, you wouldn't be able to even converse with them. Because, one, yeah, they don't really speak our language. They've definitely learned, some English and whatnot, but they communicate telepathically. So we're going to have to communicate telepathically with them. That's going to be the easiest way, and that'll be easy for everyone because there's so many languages right now. How easy would it be to just communicate telepathically? It just makes sense. That's how it's going to be. It's going to be awesome. If you guys all believe and work towards that, that'll be the reality. But you can't even communicate with them because you are going to be forced. As soon as you see them, as soon as you are in their presence, all of this emotion is going to flood into your body immediately and force you to realign all of your unaligned energy. So it's very overwhelming and lots of emotion, and you're forced to work through it all if you really want to talk to them. So especially the people who say, why don't you just land? You probably have the most stuff to realign, honey. But anyone, you have to just already be aligned and be at their frequency to meet them. Everything is frequency. This stuff in this world right now is mainly this is a very solid world. I'm very solid. Everything is. We're in third density, fourth density, higher beings, fifth density, sixth density, seventh density, even higher. You have to match vibration. So let's say seventh dimensional beings were coming to Earth. We're gonna have to meet them at a high fifth dimensional frequency to be able to talk. You have to meet them in the middle, and you have to be close enough to talk. That's how it works. So that's why they don't just land. They're too high vibe to just land. They're higher than us. They seem more dreamy. It doesn't match. They're they're in a different dimension. Dimension is a frequency. It's not a place. So they're literally in a different frequency, and you can't communicate with them. So that's why they don't just land. Also, they look scary and they don't want to just land into a place where people have guns and bombs and aren't even accepting of their own human race, yet alone other alien races. So that's why they don't just land, you guys. Now, I do believe they're making like little appearances to get people to realize their presence. Like in 1997, the Phoenix Lights, that was a hybrid children's ship flying over the Arizona area that thousands and thousands of people saw and got on film. And you can just Google that or YouTube that and see it for yourself. But the government covered that up again when there was no military ships in the area. So that's your proof there. There has literally been a president, I can't say this, but Kherson Ayumhainov of the Republic of Kalmyka. Sorry, it's getting late now, but Kherson, the former president of the only Buddhist political state, claimed that he was in his apartment in Moscow, and then this spaceship took him up, and he was like, oh, I need to be back the next day. And they're like, oh, you have plenty of time. And they actually took him to this like planet, star, like sort of far away, and they got this piece of equipment, and then they brought him back. They told him all this info, and he had like a great time. He seems like a super fun dude, so the YouTube video for that is in the description. Check that out because that's a big deal. A president of a country admitting that he's been abducted, and he's like totally accepting of it. That's awesome. Like, we're making so much progress in this like awakening movement and realizing that we are not the only beings in the universe, and we haven't been ever. So that is basically the main message of tonight, you guys. Remember to look up at the stars. Remember to turn your binaural beats on. I have binaural beats in a public playlist on my YouTube that is super cool to check out, to listen to, like while you're going to bed or to meditate or whatever. Keep in mind that we're not alone, and your thoughts radiate, and to think good thoughts towards your alien homies, because they are more powerful than you, and they can end your life in 2 seconds if they wanted to. So hopefully the government is going to disclose its information to us soon, but it's up to you to get the truth, not anyone else. You can only trust yourself. So go inside yourself, inside your soul, to remember these experiences if you have them. Trust your gut. What did you think as a kid before you went to sleep? Did you know you were going somewhere? Do you know you're going somewhere when you go to bed, when you go to sleep tonight? Like, trust yourself.
Now, the ancient Mayans said that at the end of their third calendar year, which would have been about 2012, they would be back, meaning the extraterrestrials. Now, mathematically, there's a few years of wiggle room in that calculation, and 2012 was a great period of awakening, but right around now, 2019, 2020 is going to be another great awakening era, and that might actually be the real end of the third calendar year, where most of the humans on Earth ascend into the fifth dimension. I will be talking about the hybrid program next week and explaining more of this new Earth and the integration and what this is going to look like. I'm realizing now that I didn't talk as much about abduction as I wanted to and actual stories on that, but beginning in 1961 with Betty and Barney Hill, when they were coming back from a trip driving through New Hampshire, and they saw a spaceship clear as day over their car. Again, horror movie no-no. Barney pulls over, gets out to look at it. He knows they're going to get abducted. They, drive away, get tired, don't remember anything, wake up 2 hours later, 35 miles down the road, and then later have to do hypnosis to find out what happened during that period of time. There's been so many other stories since then, more stories in the early 2000s even of this happening. So I hope you guys have a great week. Keep this in mind. Love and light. And the hybrid children are coming soon.